As Prince Abel prepares to crush the rebellion at Senia, he finds himself burdened by the weight of command. Though the veteran commander Bernardo defers to him with unwavering respect, Abel realizes that every decision rests solely on his shoulders. Just as he resolves to strike, an unexpected interruption arrives. Prince Sion of Sunkland and Princess Mia. They appear on the battlefield. While Mia hopes to stop the conflict entirely, and maybe even share a heartfelt reunion, events take a sharp turn when Sion challenges Abel to a duel, forcing the prince to choose between justice and loyalty. Unable to back down, Abel accepts, setting the stage for a clash of ideals. The duel quickly escalates into a brutal exchange, with Abel's raw power colliding against Sion's refined technique. Each strike draws blood, yet neither prince yields. As the fight reaches its breaking point, Mia desperately pleads for them to stop, only to relieve the same helplessness from her past. But just as their final blows are about to land, Dion intervenes, effortlessly disarming both princes and halting the duel, igniting Bernardo's fury into a new confrontation. The adamantine spear was a name that simultaneously described both weapon and wielder. Bernardo raised his armament of choice, a hefty beast of pure steel from tip to the shaft that normal soldiers strained to even lift, with fearsome ease and charge.
For your insolence, you shall die by my spear.
Like a one-man stampede, he thundered toward Dion with the force and ferocity of a whole line of cavalry. His momentum, coupled with the power of his thrust, propelled his spear forward at a terrifying speed. A heavy metallic clang reverberated through the air. The next instant, their overlapping forms parted again and Bernardo came to a stop behind Dion. Neither moved to disturb the ensuing silence. Eventually, Dion spoke, his arm still outstretched from the swing of his sword. "I see. A deadly trust indeed. Very impressive. I just have one question though. Are you gonna try to beat me to death with that useless stick of yours?" On cue, the metallic tip of a spear whistled as it fell from the sky and embedded itself in the ground. The scene drew little reaction from the onlooking soldiers. It was, after all, a common sight on the battlefield for a spear to lose its head. Soon, a wave of commotion began to spread through the audience as they came to a startling realization. Bernardo's spear was one unbroken bar of steel. The only way to separate its tip was cutting through steel. An impressive feat. It appears that I am faced with a competent foe. Bernardo tuned as well and examined the mirror-smooth cross-section of his spear shaft. During the split second they clashed, Dion had swung his sword with blinding speed, slicing clean through the thick steel rod. Well, you tend to step it up when you're in front of your benefactor, right? So, what are you going to do with your, stick? Huh. Obviously, I'm going to beat you to death with it. Bernardo twirled his spear staff with expert flair and smile. In his hands, the decapitated polearm remained a deadly weapon. As he still had more than enough heft to smash skulls and shatter bones, he was entirely unperturbed by the unexpected alteration to his weapon. If anything, he looked positively thrilled. This time, it was Dion's turn to pay his opponent a compliment. "You're a real riot. I like the way you think. But Remno has its fair share of crazy bastards. Mind if I ask your name?" "Bernardo Virgil, captain of the Knights of the Second Company." "Oh damn, the famed adamantine spear. Nice, nice. I see you live up to your name. Remno's got some serious heavyweights in their service." "It is your turn to state your name, Knight of the Empire." "Dion Alaya, the Empire's finest." "I don't mean to brag, but you know what? I guess I don't mean to brag."
"Huh. If you, sir, are the Empire's finest, Then, Tearmoon possesses little threat. Big words, adamantine staff? You better be able to back them up, or you're really gonna regret it. Dion pulled his other sword out of the ground and again assumed his dual-wielding stance. Regret? There is no place in the Spearman's code for such feeble sentiments. We abide by 3 tenets: charge, pierce, and breach. Bernardo readied his headless spear, preparing to drive its end, blunt though it might be, straight through the chest of his opponent. All the onlookers held their breath as the 2 peerless warriors traded deadly glares. Just as the air began to thicken with lethal tension, a bold, resonant voice shattered the asphyxiating silence. Enough! Know that you stand in the presence of Her Imperial Highness Princess Mia. It is her will that all fighting shall cease immediately. Both of you, lower your weapons. Hey, you heard the man. Bernardo had joined the fray for 2 reasons. The first was obvious. A man of unknown identity was holding a sword within swinging distance of Abel, and that was a situation that needed to be resolved immediately. Though the man displayed no intention of harming the prince, that didn't mean Bernardo could just stand there and twiddle his thumbs. The second and more important reason was to take command of the situation, to have the power. Unfortunately, with his weapon now lowered, he was no longer the center of attention, and all eyes naturally drifted toward the figure who now occupied center stage. The ball was in Mia's court. She had the power. Which was just about the last thing she expected, or wanted. She was, after all, not the only highness present. Abel was a prince, second prince, and Sion was also there. Nothing about her should have stood out. However, Bernardo's reputation for being a fierce knight had made Dion's dominating performance against him all the more incredible, and to then see him, the man who proclaimed to be the Empire's finest and had the moons to back it up, obediently shed his sword as soon as Mia's name was mentioned, it was undeniable proof of her authority. Through a deft display of social manipulation, Ludwig had placed her firmly at the top of the food chain of power. Convinced that the stage was set, he turned to her and, with a mixture of pride and anticipation, passed her the proverbial baton. There was just a tiny problem. She really didn't want that baton. Her legs were still like jelly, and her face was a weepy mess. Huh? What? Why is everyone looking at me? Having been made the focus of all the soldiers' gazes, her chicken heart quivered, and she almost quacked with terror. The only thing that stopped her was the comforting presence of her loyal vassals. With a pleading look, she turned to Anne, her first and most faithful subject, who promptly nodded, wiped away Mia's tears, cleaned her face, touched up her hair, and nodded again. Don't worry, we're right behind you. It was then that Mia realized her fate was sealed. I see. There's no getting out of this, is there? With no other choice, she braced herself and turned toward the soldiers. Her tears moistened eyes and bat-cleansed skin, imparting upon her an aura of ethereal beauty. Later, when Elise published her Princess Chronicles, readers would find within an excerpt quoting a soldier who had been present during this confrontation. The passage went as follows. When she appeared, it was as if the moon goddess herself was descending upon the battlefield. Even though it is hard to accept the truth, it is important to remember that Mia was born and raised a princess and therefore was quite used to speaking in front of crowds. Back in the previous timeline, there have been times when, accompanied by Ludwig, she would appear before large gatherings of people and give speeches, all the while being constantly insulted and struggling to project her voice over the angry masses. Even so, this is sort of scary. She shuddered a little at the concentrated onslaught of so many gazes. To be fair, It was only natural to feel nervous when a bunch of armed young men were all waiting with bated breath for her next words. Jeez, they could at least be nice enough to make some noise or something. It's so quiet. I could hear a pin drop. How am I supposed to relate like this? With truly royal arrogance, she mentally chastised her audience for failing to provide her with a suitably conversational environment. How dare they listen so intently to the imperial princess? What if she fumble a sentence? It would be so embarrassing. Everyone, please lend me your ears. I am Mia. In a most timely display of karmic justice, she fumbled her opening sentence in the worst way possible, by biting her own name. It was also rather painful, as she beat in the exact same spot as 2 chapters ago. She hoped it wasn't going to turn into a canker. As for her audience, they were caught completely off guard, and the tension on their faces vanished at once. A few burst out laughing. Most regarded the red-cheeked Mia with good-natured smiles. Ludwig, meanwhile, was stunned. He stared at her, awed by the fact that it had taken her a little more than half a sentence to capture the hearts of every soldier present. No way! Was that intentional too? Blissfully ignorant of how far he was drifting from reality, Ludwig murmured. Mia had no such luck. She was intensely aware of her blunder, and, visibly shaking from embarrassment, she shambled back to her aunt and buried her face in her apron. I don't want to do this anymore. I hate it here. Mia-sama, don't give up yet. I've never been so humiliated in my entire life. She funneled her emotions into anger. It helped her take her mind off her shame. Not that she had anyone to get angry at, of course, considering it was entirely her own fault. Nevertheless, the outburst allowed her to collect herself, and she attempted her speech again, only to realize there was another problem. Now that I remember, I have no speech. I didn't think I had to repeat it, but Mia's plan to stop the Red No army consisted in a makeup hug with Abel, which failed miserably. I mean, it wasn't even a plan. The whole point of coming here was to see Abel. She hadn't really thought the rest of it to begin with. And now that her original objective was complete, she was even more clueless as to what should come next. What should I do? In an effort to hide her embarrassment, she put on a big, bright smile, beaming from ear to ear. She swept her gaze across the surrounding soldiers, who found themselves further enamored by her charm. The power of a good bat was not to be underestimated. She positively glowed. A drop of sweat rolled down her forehead. Just what in the moons am I doing? I can't just keep smiling like this. I need to say something. Some people find silence hard to bear, so they start talking to compensate. This often results in them babbling about things better left unsaid. Mia happened to be one of these people, and she felt a desperate need to fill the silence with her own voice. As a result, she blurted out the first thing that came to mind. You know, I really wish all of you gentlemen from the Remno army would just pack up and go home. Wow, at least she's honest. Pack up and go home? You expect us to leave the rebel army alone and withdraw? What you suggest is absolutely ludicrous. For obvious reasons, her request was not well received. Bernardo's objection came hard and fast, coupled with an angry glare that seemed to say, "What the hell is this girl talking about?" It made Mia flinch. This man is so scary. He reminds me of some... He has the same aura as Captain Dion. This man is dangerous. Being fixed with a menacing glare from the Remno commander finally sent enough of a jolt through Mia to get her brain working again. With her mental faculties in working order again, she concluded that there was but one way for her to escape this predicament. Ludicrous? The only thing that's ludicrous is for you to be fighting each other. It took her long enough, but this was definitely the right reaction to have here. Hey, better late than never, right? Her method? Straight up flattery. This is a gathering of riffraff we're talking about. Self-respecting knights, such as yourself, should not be deemed to brawl with the rabble. Her sweet talking, however, only darkened the mood, and a couple of soldiers even began to glower at her. The explanation wasn't complicated. From their perspective, it felt like they were putting their lives on the line to fight for peace and order, only to have their courage belittled. Some of the soldiers wore puzzled frowns. It would have been understandable if her criticism were levied at the ethicality of slaughtering civilians. They could even stomach her condemnation if she were arguing entirely from a pacifistic point of view, as the fear of conflict could certainly push a young girl to voice her opposition to war and bloodshed. Her language suggested it was neither. Of all the things she could have said, she chose to throw Bernardo's words right back at him, describing their actions as ludicrous. Not cruel, nor immoral, but ludicrous. Why? By this point, rumors about Mia had begun to spread through Remno. Those familiar with Prince Abel had heard stories from him about the great wisdom of the Empire, who turned the weak-willed prince into a dependable young lord. Slowly, the crowd began to doubt the righteousness of their mission. If the great wisdom of the Empire says this battle is ludicrous, then maybe it actually is. Doubt crept into their hearts. Unsettled, they waited on her next words with growing anticipation. I can't believe my lip service isn't working on these people. Mia had never been a smooth talker, so despite what she thought of herself, ineffectual lip service was actually the norm for her. Nevertheless, she astutely picked up on the shifting sentiments in the soldiers' gazes. Some were now infused with curiosity, others with anger. Cold sweat dripped down the back of her neck as it occurred to her that she might be in a precarious position. She opened her mouth to speak, and a voice rang out. That's an interesting choice of words, Mia. I dare say, this isn't the first time you've used such perturbing language. What did you say the other day again? That something didn't add up? Said Sion as he crossed his arms and gave her a thoughtful look. Yes, that's it. Even though she had no idea what it was, she jumped on it anyway. Anything to change the topic. You were absolutely right. I did say that. Something doesn't add up. Luckily, as soon as she said it, she felt it again. The unpleasant sense that something shapeless and invisible was stuck to her thoughts. It really didn't add up. Something about this whole situation was entirely wrong. It wasn't so much recent analysis as it was intuition. An unconscious insight gained in her previous life when the embers of Tearmoon's revolution had yet to burst into flame. She spent those days watching the empire crumble in agonizing detail as Ludwig delivered report after dreadful report in his trademark caustic tone. The things she'd seen since coming to Remno were far removed from the Tearmoon of her past. However, the cause of insurrection and the ensuing sequence of events were awfully similar. The parallel between Outcome Ruralbond and Chancellor Dasayev Donovan was striking. In both cases, the persecution of a noble who took the people's side triggered a popular revolt, mirrored again by the intervention of the Kingdom of Sunkland, who stepped in to save the masses from the tyranny of their own ruler. What were the chances that the two locations with completely different conditions would see the same sequence of events play out? Weird, right? That can't possibly be a coincidence. Viewing this light, it was almost as if someone was trying to set Sunkland up to look like a crusader of justice. Was it the wish of a higher power, or the doings of a demonic will? It feels almost like we're dealing with a terribly devious scheme. Wait a minute, but how am I supposed to explain this to everyone? Indeed, she would have a hard time to explain why things didn't add up, seeing as her reasoning was based on experiences from her previous life. What should I do? As she quickly descended into a panic, an unexpected voice came to her rescue. A devious scheme, you say? Interesting. Do you suggest, then, that this revolt is the product of a conspiracy? That there are nefarious actors who seek to divide our kingdom through unrest, and that we are but hopeless fools playing into their hands as we shed the blood of our brethren? Is that why you refer to this battle as ludicrous, Your Highness? Eh? Oh, Princess Mia saw to this conspiracy so swiftly. Again, I am awed by your wisdom. You're amazing, my lady. Eh? Which would suggest that Prince Sion knew as well. Was that why you risked your life in a duel to stop Prince Abel? No, What in the world do you think you're doing? There's a time for honesty, and there's a time to not be stupid. Why would you say no when everyone's ready to wrap things up and move on? Sure, Sion's reason for fighting Abel might have stemmed from a clash of ideals and a mutual refusal to bend rather than knowledge of a conspiracy. And yes, pretending it was the latter might be disrespectful toward Abel and sort of unscrupulous. But Mia couldn't care less about being proper right now. Keeping Sion fairly muffled, hastily formulated a line of logic to convince him to shut up. The speed with which she did was so breathtaking, knocking out a personal buzz for cerebral RPMs in the process. More specifically, I said you're maybe about half right. Half right? Look, you came here to protect me, right? Which means if my goal was to deal with this devious scheme thing, then that has to be one of your goals too. So, on one hand, you have whatever you came to do, and on the other, you have what I came to do. Half and half, right? She spoke in a tone that suggested she was not going to take no for an answer. Well, I suppose you could say that. Good. Then, it's settled. She declared this with a tone of utter finality, before turning slightly rabid eyes on the surrounding soldiers. Well, how's that? Surely that was enough to convince them. Seeing that nobody voiced any complaints, her expression brightened with relief. Unfortunately, that is no reason for us to leave, Your Highness. While I do wish to hear your basis for suspecting foul play, even if you do provide concrete proof of the existence of such individuals, our mission remains unchanged. We must still disband the rebel army and restore order to this town. Oh no, I fear it wasn't going to be that easy, but still. The same is true for them. Upon learning that their taxes will not be lowered, I likewise doubt the rebel army will lower their weapons. What? I do believe you are mistaken. What the rebel army... Excuse me. The people involved in this uprising is demanding is the release of the Chancellor Tassayab Donovan. Her reply sent a wave of commotion rolling through the Remno army. Your Highness, have you received word from His Majesty that Lord Donovan has been imprisoned? No. My father never mentioned anything of the sort. This is the first time I've heard of such a thing. Abel, who returned from having his injuries treated, shook his head in bewilderment. Mia gave him a quick once-over and, seeing that he'd sustained no major injuries, breathed a sigh of relief. I see.
It appears, then, that we would be wise to listen to Her Highness in this regard. Should we manage to rescue Lord Donovan from his mysterious captors, then we might indeed succeed in convincing the rebel army to stand down. But until we know where he is being held, there is little we can do.
As a matter of fact, I was just thinking about that myself. In all her wisdom, I assume Her Highness has already figured out where we should go to find him. Thing is, are we going to discover a man or a body? The Chancellor was no hostage. He was a lead fuse, a mere instrument for inciting the masses to revolt. There was no need to keep him alive. Indeed, his transdimensional counterpart, Archon Rudelbahn, had not survived his role as the catalyst of Tearmoon's revolution. Dion's concern was very reasonable given the circumstances. Obvious. Unless you were Mia, of course. She no longer had any control over the conversation, and it had plunged forward, leaving her lost in the dust.
Well, that's...
Allow me to answer that question. Faced again with a question she couldn't answer, help came. Again. From an unexpected source. Hearing a familiar voice, she spun to find Kitwood, smiling awkwardly. Perched on his shoulder was a bird with a beautiful coat of black feathers.
This is it for this video. We will continue with the story of the Guillotine Princess on the next episode. This is Marco the Veteran Mexican with jobless wings. Matanem!